What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we'll be talking about fair value gaps. So fair value gap is simply inefficiency between buyers and sellers. Another name for a fair value gap is what we call imbalance. So imbalance is formed when we see aggressive movements in the price chart. That is, if you look closely right here, after this pullback right here, you can see price moves aggressively to the downside. So when we see this kind of moves, price always creates an imbalance, and same happened right here. After this pullback, we see aggressive move to the upside. So when price moves like this, we usually see an imbalance being formed. Okay, so why do we talk about imbalance, and why is imbalance very important? When price creates inefficiency in the price chart, we usually see price gravitating back to that inefficiency to rebalance price. Price will always move to areas of inefficiency just to rebalance price. Okay, so what I'll be talking about right now is how to identify an imbalance. After talking about how to identify an imbalance, I will actually teach you how you can trade a fair value gap. That is how to trade an imbalance. Okay, so let's jump straight into it. So how can we identify a fair value gap? So if you count this candle, count this as your first candle, this one as your second candle, and this as your third candle. So if you want to identify a fair value gap, the wick of the first candle and the wick of the third candle, there should be a space right there. So when you see a space between the wick of your first candle and your third candle, that is what we call a fair value gap. The gap you see right there is what we call a fair value gap. Okay, if you look at it this way, you can see this gap at these areas. This is what we call a fair value gap, and you can identify this as your imbalance. Very easy to identify. So if you continue to look right here, and if you try to draw these lines, you will see that the wicks of this candle, there is no space right there. There is no space at those wicks. Okay, you see how they met each other, how those candles closed without leaving any space. So it's okay to say that the price action these areas is actually balanced, while over here there is an imbalance, which we call a fair value gap. Okay, very simple and easy to identify. So same thing goes to this area. If you try to count this as your first candle, the second candle, and the third candle, so what did I say? The wick of the first candle and the third candle shouldn't meet. So when you see a space like this, just know that there is an imbalance, which is a fair value gap at that area. So you can go ahead, map out from the wick to the other wick. So this space you see right here is what we call inefficiency. Okay, that is your fair value gap. And if you try to see what happened at these areas, you can see there is no space at this area, and if you take it to the other candle, you can see this area's price is balanced, and over here there is an imbalance. Price will always come back to fill in an imbalance. So there are different ways price can actually come back to fill an imbalance. The first way is after price must have moved away, you might see price returning back to fill the imbalance. That is rebalancing price before continuing to push to the downside. Okay, you might see price come back, fill it, and it might give a reaction. Okay, so another way price can fill in this imbalance is after the imbalance has been formed, after the first, second, and the third candle must have formed this imbalance, we might see price returning back immediately to fill the imbalance. Okay, price might return with a wick or with a full candle just to fill in the imbalance like this and continue pushing to the downside. So you have to be at alert when the imbalance is filled if you want to trade it. So you will see when price returns to fill the imbalance, it might fill it more like instantly, or it might take a little time before returning to fill it. Okay, so just like this area, you might see price after the imbalance has been formed. In some cases we might see price filling it immediately and continue to push to the upside, and in some case we do see price takes time or takes little time before coming back, and see price gravitating back to filling that imbalance. Okay, so these are simple ways to identify imbalance. And now the question right now is, how can we actually trade an imbalance? Trading an imbalance is not really complicated, not too complicated. You can actually trade it the same way you trade your order blocks and your supply and demand zones. Just map out your fair value gap and wait for price to come back to filling your fair value gap. as long as you are doing it with the trend, okay? As long as you understand your bias and you have an edge, okay? But the most important thing about trading an imbalance is that if you want to trade an imbalance, make sure your stop loss is placed above these highs. I see a lot of people coming to trade imbalance this way. In most cases, you will always get stopped out. That's just the truth. So if you want to trade an imbalance, have it in mind that you'll be using a very large stop loss, and you can actually go ahead and set your target, okay? So same thing happens if you want to go for long. Once you enter, make sure your stop loss is placed at the low, okay? Don't set it very close to this candle. You can set it at the low of another block, because price will always feel the imbalance. Sometimes you see it pushing lower to mitigate the other block, okay? So set your imbalance, set your entry right there, and you can actually place your targets. Very simple and easy to do. So I'll be showing you a few examples on how to trade imbalance and how you can actually identify them. So looking at this area right now, looking at this area, you can see that we have a fair value gap right here. This is GBP USD. If you count this way, you can see that this is your first candle. This bullish candle right here is your first candle, the bearish candle is your second candle, and this bearish candle right here is your third candle. So you can identify this as your imbalance. So remember the way I said you should trade an imbalance. If you want to trade an imbalance, when you enter at this area, your stop loss should be placed above this high. Then you can set your targets. Very easy, and you can see what it looks like, because you can see price came, filled in the imbalance, give a little reaction, went ahead to mitigate another block before we see price pushing to the downside, okay? So this is very easy to identify. So if you look closely, you can see we have a lot of imbalance right here. We have an imbalance which price returns back to fill. So if you want to trade an imbalance, you should trade it with the trend and make sure you have another block before your imbalance. It will improve the probability of that imbalance playing out, okay? So if you continue to move, you can see we have another imbalance right here. Very easy to identify. We have an imbalance right here, and you can see how price came to fill in the imbalance. So if you want to trade an imbalance, like I said, now that we have a break of structure to the downside and we have another block at this area, the imbalance you should pay attention to is the one right here, because if you look from here, you can see that we have this space right here, and you can see how price returns, filling the imbalance and push to the downside. Very easy and simple to identify. So like I said, trade it in line with the trend, because if I try to zoom out right now, you can see price switch direction and it starts to push to the downside, okay? Price starts to push to the downside. So this is the one you should pay attention to. Remember, if you want to trade it, your stop loss should be placed at this high. So that's why I said if you want to trade an imbalance, be ready to use a very large stop loss, okay? And that's it. And if you look closely, we still have a couple of imbalance which price returns back to fill. If you look at this area, we have an imbalance. You see price taps into it, push to the upside, but it didn't fill it well. But right here, price comes back, fill it completely. If you look closely, this area, we equally have another one right here, which price comes into it, taps into it nicely, okay? So it's very, very easy to identify. Very, very easy to identify. So if you look right here, we equally have another one. We have another one right here which was filled. And like I said, if you want to trade an imbalance, trade the one that aligns with the trend. Now looking right here, you can see we have a very large imbalance which has been filled, okay? You see price, this is NFP movement. This move you see right here, it's pushed and it filled this imbalance, this very large imbalance. I actually had a zone right here. I wanted to trade from a zone right here, but it failed because NFP movement pushed and it broke above this. So there was no way I was going to trade this when I see NFP pushing to break above this zone. So it's a failed setup, okay? So this is the simplest way to identify a fair value gap, which is very, very important, okay? In this case, you can see price has actually created a fair value gap. So if I'm to take any trade from this area, what you can see is that we have a sweep of liquidity. Price sweeps this liquidity at this low right here. So this is a sell side liquidity being swept, and now you can see price pushing to the upside, and we have a break of structure right now, and we have a lot of fair value gaps. We have a lot of them, but I'll be interested in this extreme fair value gap. I'll be interested in this one, and I won't actually be trading from this fair value gap. I'll be interested in trading from another block right here, because you can see we equally have another sweep of liquidity at this low, and now I'll be interested in trading from a zone right here. So I'll be waiting for price to come back, mitigate this zone, and I will trade from there. So by next week, I will actually share this setup to my Telegram channel. So if you have interest in joining that Telegram channel, the link is in the description and you can join us today. Okay, so I hope you got value from this video. I hope you learned one or two things. Okay, so thanks for watching this one, and see you in the next video.